Welcome into episode 60 of the 5 Reasons podcast. I'm Ethan Skolnick here, as always, with Chris Whittingham. We're on iTunes, also on Google Play, Stitcher, CastBox, and our hosting app, Podbean. Be sure to check out the other podcasts in our network, Miami Heat Beat, 3 Yards Per Carry, that's our Dolphins podcast. Also, Pitch Invasion Soccer, which Chris Whittingham runs. That's going to be going throughout the World Cup. And the Balls Cast, which is a different look at Miami sports culture, politics from a humorous perspective. Also, we've got some more coming down the way, so definitely check out at 5 Reasons Sports on Twitter. All right, one of the things that we've wanted to do here is stay in touch with the NBA Finals. Obviously, the Heat are not in it, nowhere close to in it, but the ratings in Miami are really good again. They consistently are good, much better than, say, Super Bowl ratings are, at least on a comparable basis to the rest of the country in Miami, and basically a top 10 rated city. And so people are interested in the finals. Of course, a lot of that has to do with LeBron and the continued interest from his days here in 2010 through 2014. But what we wanted to do today was we wanted to sort of get behind the scenes a little bit with the 3 key figures in this series. And I worked around this guy for a year, 2014-15, when I was up in Cleveland. And one of the things that Chris Haynes does really well is get to know the people that he's covering, and has the unique experience of having covered LeBron on a daily basis, and now he's based out back in the Bay Area where he was a star himself. I've seen him do some dunking on the court. Looked like it hurt you a little bit, Haynes, sometimes when you've done it these days. But based back in the Bay Area, covering the Warriors, NBA reporter for ESPN, and so a lot of insights on Curry and Durant. So we want to take a look at those 3 guys here today. And let me just start here with part 1. Of those 3 guys, who's the most complicated to cover?
Complicated? Yeah. Wow. That's a tough one. I wouldn't really call any of them complicated. Like, me and Draymond have a good relationship, but we also have some arguments. We also go back and forth. So I don't know if complicated is the right word, but Draymond is definitely the one who doesn't mind going toe-to-toe with you. And then the next morning, he just forgets about it completely. You guys are right back to being good old buddies again. So I would say he's probably the closest to that.
But of the 3 guys, like because when you're covering an athlete of that magnitude, and I recognize this from covering Dwayne since 2003, covering Shaq when he was down here, covering a couple guys in the Dolphins who were prominent. I covered the last 3 years of Marino's career, and I obviously covered LeBron. And I think when you're dealing with those guys, it's not just the player themselves. It's kind of all the people who are around the player, whether it's the marketing guy, the agent, the trainer, and all of that stuff. I would assume that just from knowing LeBron a little bit, LeBron have the most people around him that you kind of work through when you're covering him?
Yeah, if you're talking like that, you're talking about all the different layers a player has in order to get to him. Yeah, LeBron, there's nobody compared to the layers of people that LeBron has working for him, and it's like it's a different protocol when you're trying to get LeBron. I know you, E, and a few other reporters, you can go straight to him, but for the most part, people have to go through certain sectors before you even get to him. So there's nobody else that I've covered who definitely have those multiple layers to get through.
So you make the transition from covering Cleveland to covering Golden State. What have kind of been the major differences in the locker rooms and in the dynamics within these teams?
Golden State is much more laid back. They're a team that is really accessible. I'm talking from the guy number 1 down to guy number 15. It's just a different culture over there. I think coming up in that Golden State Warrior organization to where they have one of the best PR gurus in the league, and Ray Ritter, who kind of help foster those relationships between players and the media members. And so it's been a treat, man. It's just, I'm pretty sure you guys been around them, man. You can strike up a side conversation with Steph, with KD, and KD. That's what KD talked about in leaving OKC. He wanted to talk a little bit more. They don't foster that in Oklahoma City. So it's different. And so in Cleveland, it's like you're shielded. You're able to get your side conversations with LeBron if you have a relationship with him, or with Kevin Love. But if the PR staff doesn't believe that player has a good relationship with you, they'll stand there or they'll remove you from that area. And so it's just a different culture. A lot of different organizations do it a little bit different. So it's just easy to get what you need and get what you want when you're covering the Golden State Warriors opposed to Cleveland.
It's interesting that you say that because I was coming from the Heat organization when I was up there that year in Cleveland, and I would say the Heat are in between Golden State and Cleveland on this stuff because Ray Ritter does have a reputation with the Warriors, like they win the PR award like every other year, and he does have a reputation of sort of fostering those relationships, and the Heat do too, but it's a little bit regimented because it's a Riley organization and it's just a way that they've done things for 20 years. But I was sort of shell-shocked going to Cleveland, Haynes, and I know you were coming from Portland that year, and I was a little taken aback by it because in Miami we were accustomed to getting LeBron twice a day. Like, we'd get him at shoot around and we'd get him after the game, or we'd get him before the game and after the game, and we would get him in every practice for 15 minutes. And then I went up to Cleveland, and sometimes it would be 3 days between getting him. And there would be only one player brought out. And I don't know if that's something that I never really figured it out, Chris, like whether that was something that LeBron wanted, because he was actually running that organization a lot more than he was running Miami, or if it was just the way that things were done with the Cavs, and so he just sort of folded back into that. But that was a big change. And you mentioned OKC. OKC had a reputation. I don't know if it still exists, but had a reputation. I know there have been articles written about this. Like OKC, the Knicks, and to a degree Cleveland were kind of the most restrictive organizations in the league. So it's interesting to me when you talk about Durant and you say he wanted to talk more. Why can't, you've been doing this media game long enough. Why can't somebody with Durant's power just decide to talk more? Like, why can't he dictate that to the media relations staff?
Because when you're drafted in as a rookie into a certain organization, that's all you know. And so if you have an organization that kind of wants to paint the media as the enemy, wants to paint this narrative that if you give them too much, they can draw a wedge between the team, then they're just going to follow suit because that's all they know. So Kevin Durant for almost a decade was under those guidelines. And so, and while he did have a voice, he started saying it a little, he started speaking out a little bit more his last few years, maybe his last year before leaving. But, I did an interview with him his first year in Golden State, and he said he wanted to speak more. He wanted to have more of a relationship with the media, to ask them why do they write this, or how do they come up with this idea, this he's a very inquisitive person. So it just that's the way he was groomed. And you look at Kyrie Irving, who I had trouble covering in Cleveland. He was one of the most difficult players I've ever covered. Having him been gone from Cleveland, me and him have got along much better. But he was groomed in Cleveland. That's the way the structure, that's the way the organization had things catered. And so I think I just think that if you come up in if you come up in an organization, you think that's just the way of the NBA until you go out into other situations and find out, hey, there's other ways of doing things. And you look at Kevin Durant, he hasn't stopped talking since.
I wanted to ask you about Durant because I feel like his relationship with the media has come under a lot of scrutiny because he's been going after blog bullies a lot recently and really throughout his career he's been having a pop at the media. And I think a lot of people would describe him to be sensitive or defensive. How have you found him in terms of his engagement with the media?
Sensitive, defensive. Yeah, he's like that. But the thing is, he'll tell you those are some of his traits, some of his qualities. He's not afraid or ashamed to say he's still growing as a man and that he's not perfect. He said that multiple times. And so, yeah, what you see is, that is what you get in him. He's letting you know he's still exploring. I talked to him about that, and I told him, I said, a lot of people don't like the perception of you because they feel like you're a top superstar in this league, and that they feel like you should have this stigma or you should act a certain way. You shouldn't show vulnerability. He was like, I get tired. He said there are players that do that in this league. He didn't name any names, but he said you have to keep putting on a face every single day, and it gets tiring. You have to stick to a certain script when you're talking to the media, and it gets tiring. He said, why can't I just be myself and just grow? And you can just, the people that's covering me, you can see my maturation as I evolve. He said, I'm not perfect right now, far from it, but these are my weaknesses, these are my vulnerabilities. Cover me as is. And I think that's the beauty of covering a guy like that, because he's going to keep it real. He's going to make mistakes on the fly, but he's comfortable knowing that this is not the finished product. And so that's just the Kevin Durant that we've gotten to see ever since he came to Golden State. And I think when he was at OKC, there was just a mystery behind who he really is, what he really thinks. And now we're just seeing all of that.
It's interesting you talk about it because you make him sound really genuine. So I'm going to give you a poll that I put up here on @5ReasonSports earlier today. And this result would have been, in my view, completely opposite a few years ago. But I asked, who do you think is the most genuine of these three guys? And how do you think it came down, Haynes? Curry, LeBron, and Durant.
Most genuine, I think Steph 1, LeBron 2, KD 3.
Okay. All right, because here's how it came down. 57% LeBron, 33% Steph, 10% KD. And I just go back to, say, 2010, right, where LeBron makes his decision. He's instantly the most polarizing athlete in the world. And Durant made his own decision on Twitter and was praised for it because it was like no big show, no 1 hour with Jim Gray, no big circus. This is just quiet KD doing his thing on Twitter. If I did that poll 8 years ago, I think it would have been, and again, Steph was not Steph at that point, but it would have been all Steph and Durant. I don't think it would have been any LeBron at that stage. And remember, Haynes, I'm basically targeting a Miami audience here. So there's a lot of people here who are still bitter about LeBron leaving, and he's still polled highest at 57%. Why do you say that Curry is the most genuine of the three?
Because that was just my guess on how fans probably perceive these players. But Steph is just like, he's approachable. It's like he you haven't heard about any dirt on Steph, anything close. You haven't heard anything about bashing teammates. Is he a good is he a coach killer? And those are a lot of things that come with when you hear about LeBron. A lot of it is not accurate, but those are some of the things that people say about LeBron. So a wholesome figure, a Christian, he walks with his faith, things of that nature. That's why I figured Steph to be number one. I mean, that's still surprising, even though how long ago was that when that poll was first conducted?
I put that poll up today. And again, I'm telling you, Haynes, I mean, because there are still people down here. It's not as bitter as it was. I think people down here over the course of 4 years have come to appreciate LeBron more. There was a lot of people upset, not just about the fact that he left in 2014, but kind of the way he left, the feeling that he kind of left Riley in the lurch with a bad roster and kind of knew what he was doing all along, although I don't necessarily agree with that entirely. But people took Riley's side on it down here for the most part. And I think that cooled a little bit in 2016 when Riley and Wade were at odds, and I think more people kind of looked at the organization with a little more critical eye, and I think that helped LeBron in terms of public perception here. But I think, again, they've just come to appreciate him more. But if you were to tell me, again, 4 years ago, if you were to tell me again 4 years ago that LeBron, was the most considered the most genuine by a mostly Miami-based, audience here,
yeah.
I would have told you that you were crazy. So I think it's come around, and I think it does speak to the fact that, again, and this is about 1,000 votes we got on this today, so it's not a real small sample size. The fact that only 10% of people think that KD is genuine, do you think that's just, I know we've talked about some of the issues he's had with bloggers and et cetera, but is that mostly, in your view, kind of a result of the decision to join a stacked Golden State team that the perception of him has changed?
That and, the burner accounts, I think that plays a part as well because, they look at KD as, like I said, he's a superstar player. And he says this, he says this in front of the media and whatnot. But then he has a burner account that, that goes and defends his honor. Or, similar to what, the Colangelo situation. So people look down upon that. But like I said, he came out, and which I was surprised by. He came out and admitted that that was his account. Like, this is Kevin Durant. He could have easily came out, lied, but he could have easily came out and said, one of my people was running my account. I have people who does this, and they forgot to switch the account. He could have easily said that, and I think there definitely would have been some skepticism, but I definitely think a lot of people would have believed him. But he came out and owned it. And so I think the decision with the burner account shows a lot of his insecurities, and I think that's probably some of the main reasons, components of why his perception is the way it is.
Do you think athletes should engage more on that level? Because I think a lot of people just sort of assume that they're meant to kind of keep an arm's length from it and not really be interested that much in what regular people have to say about what they do. Do you feel like maybe Durant should be more like the norm rather than everyone else who kind of keeps their fans and keeps the sort of discourse at arm's length?
Well, it depends on if the player can handle it, because if a player is becoming more engaged with fans and social media, you're gonna open yourself up to fans who are, cursing you out, talking derogatory, talking about your family and all that stuff. So it's a fine line. I asked LeBron that question. Believe it was after game or before game 2, and basically he says to each his own. Like, if you can't handle social media, if you can't handle being more engaging with fans, then turn your social media account off. Take it off your phone. So it's just a matter of what you can handle. And sometimes I think Durant handles it correctly, and sometimes he doesn't. Like, every now and then, if you check out Durant's account, he'll go back at fans and just start arguing with them. And some people look down upon that. And they say, why are you belittling yourself? Why are you talking down to, these people who are just trying to get a reaction from you? And I remember Durant told me personally, he was like, look, I'm a human too. I want to talk shit too. That's me. I want to do that. Like, why can't I enjoy myself? Why can't I troll a little bit? I like to do that as well. So I'm just trying to give you a sense of just who he is. He's Kevin Durant, but he's more approachable, more accessible than that of a LeBron James or a Michael Jordan type figure. And he doesn't even want to be in that realm as far as being those untouchable guys. That's just him.
One of the conversations I had with LeBron, you talk about the conversation with Durant about social media and your question of LeBron. I remember way back in 2013 being in San Antonio, and it was something that Skip Bayless had said that day, to try to get a rise out of him. And he just looks at me, and I asked him if he'd seen it, and he just shook his head. And then he went back in, he took a shower, he came back out, he found me, and he goes, someday I'm just gonna fucking go off. I mean, that was his thing. He's like one of these days I'm just gonna fucking go off. And it never really entirely happened while he was with the Heat. And what's interesting to me is we've seen it a little bit over the past year or two, like beyond just the passive-aggressive fit-in, fit-out stuff or the Arthur thing or, the kind of stuff that he puts on social media, like directly calling the president of the United States, whatever you think of Trump, but calling him a bum on social media is not something the LeBron James with the Heat would have done. I don't think I think he would have been too concerned about sponsors and all that. So I see over the past 4 years, and I started to notice it a little bit that first year back in Cleveland, Chris, that he just doesn't care anymore like the way that he used to. And I'm just curious from your interaction, I know you're not around him every day anymore like you were when you were covering the Cavs, but have you seen that from him, that it's just sort of I don't give a shit what people think as much anymore?
No, he's definitely, I think he started that trend. I believe he started the trend of superstar players, that is, of just being authentic. Because remember that, obviously there was a concern years ago that if you revealed too much, you would lose sponsors. You would cost yourself money. But I think nowadays your authenticity is what sells. So, you're seeing players cursing more, or you see them expressing their views a little bit more. And it's not having any impact on their endorsement, or negative impact. It's not having a negative impact on their endorsement. their partnerships. And, people want to see that. And that's part of branding. That's part of branding, being who you are, letting your personality show. It's a situation with Kawhi Leonard. And he's trying to get more money on a shoe deal. And people are saying, well, you got to show more. There's more to Kawhi than what we've seen. There's more to him. It just hasn't gotten out yet. But that sells. That sells. You being you being direct. And obviously, with LeBron, going off on Trump, you're going to alienate a certain group. But at the end of the day, I think he's still profiting very, very well, if not more. You bring up LeBron going off. He went off a couple years ago to Dave McMenamin on Charles Barkley. Remember when he tore him to shreds? Mm-hmm. So that's not. I like it, and I definitely, these guys just coming to their own. And I think more so they're seeing that there's not really a huge negative effect if they choose to really speak their mind.
One of the things I want to follow with you on that, Chris and I have done a podcast on this. I'm curious for your thoughts on it too, because I know you follow the NFL also. There is no as you mentioned, there's no backlash against NBA players for speaking out. There is a backlash against NFL players. I mean, you're based up there in the Bay Area now, so you're pretty familiar with what's gone on there the past couple of years in terms of Kaepernick still not getting an opportunity. I'm just curious if you sort of notice the difference there, and if the players notice the difference there, that they're in a league that has essentially empowered them to be themselves, whereas NFL players are being told to hide in the locker room.
It's interesting because I think the only true difference is how the NFL owners and Roger Goodell's NFL are handling things, like just imposing these bans. But if you really think about it, if you really look at the rule book, the NBA has a similar guideline and stance as far as the anthem. And it's just that the owners, for the most part, and NBA Commissioner Adam Silver have been very supportive in trying to help and find resolutions to better help, rid this world of social, inequality. And I think that they've been more genuine in their approach. But look, and I think that's why the players haven't resorted to doing anything to where they feel like they have to. I don't know if that's taking a bold stand of, I don't want to get out too much into the protesting thing. But what I will say is that the same rules essentially in place in the NBA. It's just that there's better leadership up top who and they are communicating with the players and trying to get understanding of what they're going through, what the players' family members or friends are going through, so they can better help the situation. And I think the players feel like they have that help, they have that support, so there hasn't been any need to go out there and do any type of form of protesting. But look, if a player did choose to go protest, that's where I'm looking for. That's where I want to see what will happen. How would the NBA come down? Because, like I said, the same rule is in place about the anthem that it is in the NFL. It's just that they feel the players feel like they have more support. So that's something that we haven't seen. So I do want to commend the NBA for being forthright and being proactive and trying to help and find an answer to the problem. But it hasn't gone down the same road that the NFL has gone down. And to that, I just think I can't not truly judge them accurately as I am the NFL, because, I don't think we've taken it to that level to be able to truly see what would they do.
All right, we'll be right back with Chris Haynes, but first, a word from one of our sponsors. Are you looking to sell your house? Do you know the accurate price for it? In South Florida, you want to work with a real estate agent that is professional, trustworthy, and knows the area well. Get a free house price analysis from a real estate agent at Priority Realty Partners. You'll love working with a Priority Realty Partners agent just like their clients do. You deserve to work with a knowledgeable partner when buying or selling your home. They're knowledgeable, part of the community, and Miami sports fans just like you. It's a great time to buy or sell in South Florida. So go to www.priorityrealtypartners.com and select one of the sales agents for your free house evaluation. That's Priority Realty Partners, That's PriorityRealtyPartners.com.
Wanted to talk about Steph a little bit more because you've had the chance to get to know him a little bit covering the team. And I feel like he's kind of the opposite of KD in a way, where I think a lot of people view him to be nice and sort of this perfect all-American family with the superstars and all, with sort of his sort of cultivated image. And yet on the floor, he's kind of not just been an instigator in this series, but he does a lot of taunting, does the shimmying, and the thing where Chris Paul did it to him in the Rocket series, and then just got into it with Kendrick Perkins. I feel like his sort of persona on floor versus off floor are very different. How have you found it?
He's pretty tame, pretty calm and cool, off the court. On the court, he's just having fun, man. That's just what he does, man. I was watching him at practice yesterday. He hit a half-court shot. It was like right before practice started. He hit a half-court shot, and he just started looking around to see if anybody saw it. Like, wow, look what I did. He's just a showman. He's a showman, and he does that during his pregame routine that thousands of people come down early to the game to catch and watch. That's just part of him. But no, I definitely think he's trying to shed that soft, light-skinned image that he has of just, he wants to make sure everybody knows, like, look, I'm here to have fun, but look, I'm gonna come at you. Him getting into Kendrick Perkins, I was like, look at Steph. I don't want to see Kendrick tear the poor boys to shreds, but look, I was like, man, look at Steph getting all his face doing that, and so he's been doing that, and then getting into it with LeBron, and talking some stuff with him. So he wants people to know that he ain't no punk. But he also still wants to enjoy the game like a kid. That's how I view him, as a little kid on the court. But he's very calm, cool, mellow, and humble off of it, for sure.
Which of these three guys most needs to be liked, in your opinion? Most feels the need to be liked?
You put me on the spot, E.
Well, the reason I asked the question, Haynes, is because that was always the perception of LeBron, particularly, and just to tell a story on this when he came to Miami. Yeah, because when he came to Miami in 2010, and it was the villain thing, right? And for a period of time, like I was going around the country with him, and every building we went into, he's public enemy. One, and it was places that he was never considering in free agency. So there was no reason for them to be so angry at him. Like, I understand maybe Chicago. I certainly understood Cleveland, maybe New York. But, like, he was never considering Memphis. He was never considering Sacramento. He was never considering Portland. And yet he was, it was violence. Like, it was like verbal violence every night towards LeBron. Like, things about his mother, things about his wife, everything related to him. And there was a period of time, and I remember specifically a game in Portland where he got booed, and I remember them winning the game in overtime, and he started taunting the crowd in overtime. And we asked him about it afterwards, and he seemed to be, for a minute, embracing the villain thing. Like, he was going to run with it. But we found out after the season ended and the way that everything emotionally collapsed on him in the finals against Dallas, that it was just too much to bear, because LeBron had always been liked. Like, coming out of high school, doing the commercials with Kobe, the puppets, all of that stuff, playing 12 characters on commercials, that, like, LeBron wanted deep down to be liked. And I feel like a part of his decision in 2014 was about that too. It was, he changed the whole narrative about him by going back home to help the kids of Cleveland, as opposed to playing for big bad Miami and this tropical paradise where everybody thinks that everyone drives Mercedes, right? So I think he changed it. So I always thought it was LeBron, but as I see the way that Durant interacts, that's why I don't know if it's such a close call now. I don't know if it's such an easy call.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say. 5 years ago, I guess before he came back, I would have said LeBron for sure. But, I would say just by default, probably KD will be the one. But even he is at the point where, at least he says it, that I don't give a what for what anybody's thinking about. This is what I wanted to do, and it took some. He knew he was going to take heat going to go to the state, so he knew the criticism was going to come with it, and he still made a decision to do it. And is he ever going to be like he was in OKC? I don't know. I don't know, but he felt like he needed to make a decision that made him happy. So I think it was kind of bold of him to do that, to go that route. So, but by default, if you give me those three, probably KD falls in the top dog.
And so, in terms of when you look at kind of the way that they feel amongst their peers, who do you think either commands the most respect or is kind of liked the most by the other players in the league?
I think LeBron commands the most respect because I think he's the best player in the game. I think. Well, what was the other one you said? He was commanding most respect,
most liked
amongst the peers. Yeah, probably Steph is most liked. Nobody really has a problem with Steph and Curry. I remember early on in his rise, there were some players that were, thinking like, is he legit? Like, is this sustainable? Is the media just trying to find the next, golden child? And I know LeBron was looking at that because I was covering LeBron, during that time when Stephen Curry was going on, in flight. And, LeBron, had some questions, initially. Wanted to know, what was this real? Was this sustainable? And then, people were trying to take the mantle from him, and so you see it now, like there hasn't been a finals where LeBron and Steph hasn't gotten into it. And it's always when LeBron blocks one of his shots because it's like, that's his opportunity to remind Steph that, I'm still the best. And not just remind Steph, remind the whole world. So, the people who try to anoint Steph to be the top dog. So, yeah, I think Steph is the most liked, but I think you got to respect LeBron. He's the top dog.
You mentioned the LeBron Curry thing, and I remember that too in the 14-15 season when again Steph was starting to have the top jersey sales, was starting to get commercials, and I just remember in the locker room in Atlanta one day, I'm not sure if you were in there, it was a pregame, and something had happened with Steph and his daughter, and with Riley, and LeBron just looks up and he goes, everybody in that bleeping family is beautiful. Like and it was like, it was a compliment, but it was like this, I don't know, there was a little more to it, right? Like where it seemed like he just, I guess the whole golden child thing that you're talking about. Like I think, this feeling, and again, LeBron comes from a different background than Steph does, obviously a less stable house situation, less stable growing up. People, look, I mean, we don't, we're not familiar with LeBron's father. We're very familiar with Steph's father. I mean, it's just a very different upbringing and everything. And I felt like there was just a little bit of jealousy there during that period of time. And so you're right. Whenever he has an opportunity against Steph, he seems to take it, to prove that he's the best. And I'm curious how he'll react this year, Haynes, because if you take a look at what's happening in this series, it's pretty likely LeBron's going to have the best numbers. I mean, he's averaging 40 through 2 games, but it's also very likely he's not going to win MVP. And I know you remember from 2014-15 that LeBron was pretty pissed, and the people around him were pretty pissed that Iguodala won MVP that year, even though the Warriors won the series. And Steph's probably going to win MVP this year. I mean, if he has 2 games like the last one, I think he likely gets it. I don't think that's going to go over, so I think that's just going to add to this a little bit.
And it possibly will, but if I said this on the jump, even if the Warriors sweep, but if they sweep and each game is pretty close from here on out, and LeBron is putting up 45, 10, and 10, close to triple-double, put up another 50 somewhere in there, and like, I would probably still feel like he deserves the Finals MVP. Now, obviously, I want to see what Steph does. If Steph continues to have games like he had, in Game 2, then give him the award. He's earned it. But look, I'm not opposed to giving the best player in that series the Finals MVP, regardless if they won or lost, because it's happened before. So, it depends on what LeBron, depends on the numbers, man. It depends on the numbers. For me, it depends on the numbers, and it also depends on how close these games are. Like, if he's continually having, games like Game 1, I know things got out of hand in overtime, but, it was a close game, 51 points, and he had them right there. if there's some games, continue to be games like that for him, man, for me, like, I'm like, God, like, how can you not give it to him? You know? And so I'm definitely looking forward to see how this thing is going to play out. Hopefully this series goes longer than 4 so we can see more of these bouts to see what's going to happen. But I think most people would think this series is not it's not set up to go that far.
Yeah, I don't think it is either. And this would be the third time that LeBron would be the best player in the finals and not win the MVP. I mean, he didn't win against Iguodala, and he didn't win that series, the Kawhi one either in 2014. Even though when you look at the numbers, Kawhi had a great series, but he basically got credit for LeBron not going completely off on him. Like, it's not like he matched his numbers. He just played well enough, and the Spurs won. All right, one more on these three guys, then I want to pivot to something else with you quickly. I think something that Heat fans will be interested in. What do these three guys think of each other? You've talked a little bit about LeBron on Curry. Have you had any conversations with Curry about LeBron, with Durant about LeBron, and what is the interaction like on a daily basis between Curry and Durant?
So Curry on LeBron, he respects him. He respects him as a player. Look, LeBron, I wouldn't say he had a thing for Curry. He just wanted, just as a competitor, a natural competitor, he wanted to showcase his talents and let everybody see that he hasn't lost a step and he's still the guy. So that's why he's always going at Curry. From covering Steph and talking with Steph about LeBron, I get the sense that he doesn't, like, LeBron is not his goal. It's not his aim. Like, he didn't even anticipate himself being of this magnitude of a player. So, like, there's not really anything there between the Steph and LeBron like it is LeBron or Steph, because LeBron feels like he still has something to prove. Now, with KD and LeBron, you guys remember in the lockout year, those two were working out together. And so they were close. KD always wanted to beat LeBron. That was it. He wanted to beat LeBron. He was crushed when he couldn't do it when OKC went to the finals. What year was that? That was 2012, I believe. Finals.
Yeah, the finals between them was 2012. Yep.
Okay, so he was crushed, and so his whole thing has been about beating LeBron. And, like, if you ask KD who's the best, he's going to say it's him. And everybody's supposed to say they're the best. Nah, I've talked to him numerous times about this, on numerous occasions. He thinks he's the best in the league, and that was his way of going. You know, he wanted to go to Golden State, a team that he felt like played the right way, and he can help take that extra step. And he felt so good. Do you remember after he won the Finals MVP? I forgot who he did the interview with, but he made that remark saying that him winning Finals MVP and the championship over LeBron was LeBron passing the torch. You guys remember him saying that?
Yeah, I do. I actually don't.
Oh, yeah. He said that. He ended up backtracking months later about it. But I knew when he said that, I knew, I'm like, man, hold on. LeBron ain't passing no torch. Like, LeBron, like, if you ask LeBron that, he'll disagree with that. He said, I ain't passing nothing. But that's just KD. He always wants to get over on LeBron. And so that's how KD feels about LeBron. LeBron respects KD. Like, they were making some big plans, some big business plans back in those days, and things just didn't happen at that time. So LeBron always wanted KD under his wing, but KD didn't want to be sunned. He wanted to be the top dog, and so that's KD's view of LeBron.
Yeah, and the only thing I can add on LeBron's view of KD, and I've told this story before, but asked him in Phoenix one night, I think during the 2013 season, 2012-2013 season, after he won his first championship with Miami, and I asked him, when will people start giving KD a hard time about not winning a championship the same way that they gave you a hard time? And he said, when I retire. He said people will care more about me winning my second than him winning his first, and I think that was true, actually. And so I didn't take it as dismissive of Durant. I just took it as, this is LeBron basically putting into perspective the different ways that the two of them were viewed to that point. And I think the only way that KD has sort of gotten a little of that heat was doing something similar to what LeBron did by going, leaving his, first team and going to join another one. I want to pivot with you here Chris, because before you came to Cleveland to cover the Cavaliers, you covered the Blazers, and you just recently did a really good special with Lillard and McCollum. And this is largely for our Heat fans down here who are desperate for a star to be traded to Miami. And we've seen all summer that Lillard's hanging out with Whiteside. McCollum seems to have a relationship with Whiteside. Now, Whiteside might be a piece that might have to be sent another direction anyway. You know that Portland situation intimately. First thing, do you think either of those two guys want to be traded? And do you think either of those two guys will be traded?
I don't think they want to be traded. None of them want to be traded. But I think if you're Portland, I just don't know that you can continue to go on with the 6'3" backcourt. They have very limited assets over there. Very limited. They have a bunch of players who are overpaid, and teams are not going to take them off their hands. Not by themselves. Not a 1-for-1. So the only other option is to trade to get back adequate value. Is to trade one of those two guards, and I think if that's the option they're going to go to, then I think that guard is CJ. Damian Lillard, the franchise player. So I think. But look, I'm going to tell you right now. When you talk about the Miami Heat, if you ask most players, give them the top 3 teams that they would like to get shipped to, if they had to get traded to, Miami will be on the short list of most players. So that you never will have a problem with having players interested in your ball club. But with that being said, there are some complicated matters that have to be, taken into effect when you're making a trade like that. Are the Heat, do they trade? Does Miami trade for CJ? Who do they give up? Is Whiteside going to Portland? Portland has a deal, situation with Nurkic. They got to figure out if they're going to re-sign him. So there's a lot of moving parts, but I would have to think, one of those guards will have to be moved, and I think it would be CJ.
I just kind of wonder if maybe Portland would want to do better, but I feel like there really isn't that many teams that are going to be willing to take on salaries and that in sort of this trading season. But do you feel like there are going to be a lot of teams that maybe look at the Warriors and now in the Eastern Conference look at the Celtics and maybe even the Sixers and go, well, hang on a second, we're a long way off here, and we're going to make some trades to try and change the mix here. Do you feel like a lot of teams are maybe heading down this path, and do you think Portland will in the end pull the trigger on a McCollum trade?
Well, the thing is, I don't. My gut tells me probably not, because look, you're competing in the West. You're competing with Houston and Golden State. In the East, like you mentioned, those teams that's on the rise, and then depending on what LeBron James does, you still got Cleveland to deal with. And so, does a CJ McCollum trade? I don't know what player you get in return, but does that make your ball club better? Does that put you in the same category as Houston and Golden State? I would think not, and I would think not by a large distance. So that's why I would think that they would probably stand pat. But I will say this. Damian Lillard doesn't like losing. He's getting tired of the early playoff exits. And so, he spoke to Paul Allen, the Blazers owner. I reported that back in February, I believe, or maybe it was January. And he wanted to know what was going on with the organization. So he's showing a sense of urgency. He's showing that he wants to see things, get done expeditiously. And if they don't, if nothing happens this summer, and they go into the regular season basically with the same team and become another early exit, then I can see Damian Lillard making a move as far as talking to Paul Allen and saying, hey, we got to do something here. We got to do something drastic. So, there's some urgency going, happening over there. And if I'm Miami, I'm certainly checking in routinely to see what's going on, to make sure they stay on top of things, just in case things do get kind of crazy over there.
All right, last one here for Chris Haynes. You can follow him at Chris B. Haynes. Obviously, follow his work on ESPN.com and on the network. Appears on The Jump pretty frequently, too, with Rachel Nichols. So just going to throw this one at you. We've talked about this on just about every pod recently, but you obviously have contacts in LeBron's camp. You have a relationship with LeBron. If I was to say, all right, which of those locations is most likely for LeBron this offseason? Is it Philly? Is it Houston? Is it Cleveland? Is it LA? Is it a dark horse like even, say, a Miami, which has been brought up down here, although I don't know how they pulled that off? Where do you think his lean is?
As of right now, with no true insight, just based off of, what I say just based off of what I've heard months ago, I will put Philly in there. I'll put Philly number one. I will put Cleveland in there as well, and I'll put Cleveland there right now because there's not going to be a lot of money out there. There's not a lot of teams with cap out there, so the options are limited. And so I think Cleveland still gives them a chance to at least get to the finals every single year. And then let me throw a dark horse in there. Let me throw Toronto in there.
Whoa! Whoa!
I haven't heard that.
He already owns the country, Haynes. I mean, is that the deal? If you keep beating them, then you join them. That's kind of the opposite of what KD did.
You guys remember what DeRozan said last year in the postseason? He said, I think it was after they got bounced by Cleveland. He said, "Well, if we have LeBron, we'll win too." So maybe that's what needs to happen.
Now, do you think? I mean, I just want to explore this with you for another second here because you talk about shaking up the league. I mean, I love that city, and I know a lot of NBA players love that city. But for LeBron, the biggest star in America, to leave America to play for the only Canadian team. I mean, I guess, look.
Why not be the biggest star in two countries?
I guess you could be, and I guess, look, he doesn't like the president very much, and I know there were a lot of people who said they would go to Canada if Trump was elected. If LeBron was the one to actually do that, people might follow him. That's a pretty crazy thought.
Yeah, he could start the migration. There you go.
Well, that would certainly change things. If Masai can pull that one off, that would be interesting. I mean, what's funny is from a roster perspective, Chris, like it's not crazy from that perspective. I mean, they have the best bench in the league. They have supporting players. Cap wise, I think they could probably make it happen. He would stay in the Eastern Conference. But man, and it's an international city. But man, that would be ESPN would be moving a lot of its people up to Canada. That's for sure. You might get moved again, Haynes. I don't know I know you like the Bay Area, but you might get moved again. But
I love Toronto. I love Toronto, but only in May and June.
Right. Well, those are the only times LeBron would have to play, actually, right? I mean, Toronto could probably make the playoffs without him. And then he could just join them in mid-April when it warms up in Toronto. That's actually not such a bad idea. All right, Chris Haynes dropping a little bomb there at the end. That's good stuff. All right, follow him at Chris B. Haynes on Twitter. Always appreciate it. I still have video of you trying to dunk at practice and not at Quicken Loans, but in Independence at the practice facility. So maybe we'll release this with the pod. But thanks for doing it, buddy.
Chris, take care, guys. Thanks for having me.